everybody. How you doing? Welcome, 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 welcome to Ancestrally Speaking. How are you feeling? How's the week been treating you? I hope it's been good. Definitely hope it's been good. Um, we are live with Ancestrally Speaking, and I'm incredibly excited to be joined by DJ Orsar. Now, DJ Orsar is a Egungun Priest, and he's going to be talking with me about African spirituality. I mean, you know, what turns a DJ into African spirituality and all those other kind of things, as well as all the other good stuff we usually get into on a Sunday. Tell me in the comments, how have you been? Again, this is Ancestrally Speaking. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Sunday, the 9th of August. How are you feeling? Are you good? You better be good. I hope so. And if you're not good, I hope you're on your way to being good. I know exactly how that feels. My week has been interesting. It's been a little bit emotionally up and down, but it's cool. You know, I'm alive, I'm breathing, and to be frank, in these current times, that's a really big bonus. Okay, we got DJ Orsar. He's about to join. Again, tell me in the comments how you guys are feeling. Where are you, Orsar? We are waiting. Yay! Hi! How are you? How's it going?
I'm
Brilliant.
fine.
We can hear you.
It's going well. How are
Not
you?
bad at all. It's nice, loud, and clear. I love it. I love it. I love it. So welcome, Orsa. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So this is Ancestrally Speaking, where we get down every Sunday to kind of talk about life from an ancestral point of view. And I thought it'd be really nice to introduce you to my audience, because I think probably your journey to African spirituality is probably going to be an interesting one. So I wanted you to kind of tell us how this DJ host turns into an initiated Egungun Priest. Like, how does that happen? How did you find home within African spirituality? Tell me, how did that all happen?
Wow. Wow. Okay. Let me just give the full kind of intro. The global world knows me as DJ Asar, host of the Calacuta Show on 89.3 FM WRG in Atlanta. On the London side, they know me for body music on soulandjazz.com. I've pretty much been, I've been on the radio since 2006. But as of 2004, I ended up becoming an initiated Ifa priest. And then by 2009, an initiated Egungun priest. So each of those journeys was a little bit different. You know, one was kind of straightening and narrowing, and then the other one became, okay, how do you have 2 feet in 2 different worlds? One in the ancestral realm and one in the physical realm. So as my journey began as a practitioner of Ifa or Isese tradition, it basically gave me direction on how I should proceed for the journey within radio. So instead of just playing top 40, this, that, I had to be very, very specific with the messages that I put out. So, you know, the songs that I will put out will be wisdom-based, more communication-based. So that's how that came to be. And then in my spiritual world, I became, or should I say, those that know me in the Ifa world, they know me as Awo, Odutola, Orisak Bemi, Egumba De Sayemi.
Yes, with the accent. Show them.
Here we are. Here we are.
I love that. And I love how actually you're saying that your spiritual life has really informed the global life, right? And that it's actually not conflicting in a way. It's kind of enriching.
No.
Both of kind of enriches each other in a way. And I think that's the thing that I think a lot of healers and other people go through, is how to walk that line of having this human experience, but also being in contact with the spirit world and doing the work of ancestors and things like that. Like, that's a really big kind of sometimes conflict, you know, between the two. I mean, what it can be, right? It can be. And so, you know, talk to me, what drew you to African spirituality? I mean, were you raised Christian, Muslim? Like, what was your story there?
So I grew up in California, and when I was young, probably fourth or fifth grade, I was the one in my family, not knowing that my mom had did it previously, but she didn't really present it in the house. But what
Interesting.
happened for me was that I was the one that was bringing uh, Kwanzaa, bringing
Right.
different African
Yes.
bases of information to the
Yes.
house. You know, this is roughly about 1987,
Right.
19. We're up in that period, and you know, everybody was like, you know, you're the young JJ Evans. I mean, not JJ, but Michael Evans.
Yeah.
That was how they teased me.
Yeah.
And yes, we grew up in a Christian household, strongly Christian.
Mm.
But as I started bringing these things, you know, during that period of the 90s hip hop, we start, you know, seeing what is more important for Blackness as far as our journey in life. Well, fast forward, I moved to Atlanta, and during that transition of going from California to Atlanta, I was having these spaces where I was waking up. And, you know, I grew out of that into where I would begin to practice different specific spiritual arts like Capoeira Angola out of Brazil, in which we know embedded in Capoeira Angola is Candomblé, or even Umbanda, or even Mukumba, which are other spiritual practices out of Brazil.
Right.
Well, in doing that, it put me in contact with, you know, a Babalawo, where I started my journey and started getting readings, started finding out things about, you know, who I wasn't as an individual. And then I met my Oluo, Fakayode Fani, the Agbangbon of Oshobo. I traveled to Oshobo in 2004 with 3 of my other colleagues, and it's been on ever since.
Wow. So you deep in the cut, like you're like, yes, I'm going to Nigeria, I'm going into the interior, I'm going to deal with my people. It ain't no like, you know, tourism
Listen,
kind of thing for you. It's like I'm in
no,
there.
no, no, no. When you're sitting next to the Ata Oja, you're sitting next to various high chiefs, you're sitting next to the Araba, you know, which is the highest Ifa priest in that particular community, Araba Yemi Elebuba. At the time, he wasn't Araba yet, but the previous Araba, I had a chance to sit at his feet, and I mean, imagine sitting next to Grandpa, and he's rubbing his knees with liniment oil, and he's looking at you, and you're like,
Is this happening?
wow,
Like,
this is
that is amazing. I love the full circle moment I find in the diaspora when people come back to traditional spiritual frameworks. You know what I mean? But I find it such a beautiful thing because we've been interrupted so heavily. There's been such a strategic and focused attack on us connecting to our intuition and our ancestors. But it's such a beautiful thing when I see anyone in the diaspora really decolonize themselves in ways that they set themselves for freedom for themselves and their legacy forever. Like it's untouched. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I guess, tell me, you found home in ancestral you know, and African spirituality. Has there been any kind of like, even in your circles and stuff, people who started reacting to you differently because of it, or did everyone embrace it? How was that kind of thing?
Absolutely.
Everyone embraced it, or they were like,
absolutely.
You know, what
happened? Listen. It first started with my family.
Yeah.
My family started calling me the voodoo man, the hoodoo man. They started calling me all kind of names. Some of them kind of, you know, pushed away from me, you know, when I started to have to go back home and start doing ancestral rites for family members of mine who passed away. And they would look at me and like, yo, what is that? What are you doing? And it just became this, yo, I'm the same person who you've grown up with. The only difference is that my path has taken me to claim responsibility for our ancestral lineage, for our family's maintenance and care for those who are no longer being called upon, because they are here for our maintenance and care. You know, which I have a feeling this
are here for our maintenance and care. People, listen to this word this morning. It's so important.
Now, what's interesting, and I have a feeling that this question is going to come up a little bit
Yeah.
later on, but just to kind of give you a
Yeah.
preface, because
Yeah.
I know it's coming. Our ancestors are responsible for helping us to maintain food, clothing, and shelter. They do the work of making sure that you are
That's
okay.
it.
But one of the other things that they do from the realm that you don't see is that they help you to deal with generational trauma. They help
Yes.
you when you call upon
Yes.
them. They help you to seek the
Yes.
clarity and the answer to solve the problem
Yes.
that you're faced with
Yes.
now. So that way you don't repeat the mistake of a previous ancestor in the past. They also help to guide you. So say, for instance, when you have those memories about grandma or your dad or anybody who's passed away, and they come to you in thought, they come to you in dream, they come and they speak. And if you're listening clearly, they will tell you, baby, remember I told you this? Well, this is what you need right now. Use that. And when you use it, you'll be like, oh, wow, okay, this is what we have to do.
I love that. I love you've just put it so clearly and plainly for all to kind of understand, because I think a lot of people, you know, they see these things, they're like ancestors, but I don't really know what if some of them aren't so good and this, that, and the other. You know, like for a lot of people, it's quite stressful for them to think to get in contact with their ancestors. And then there's this whole, what if they don't like me? What if they don't think what I've been doing? You know, I've been doing my mess and they've been seeing it and they're just like, you know, like, I guess, how can we kind of reduce that fear with people connecting to their ancestors? You know what I mean? Because you said a word earlier. You said they are here to care and care for us and guide us. They're our biggest army.
Okay, so in life, your family members are there to support you. So if you remember your previous family member, like grandma, grandpa, uncle, great aunt, this, that, they treated you well in the living. What makes you think that they're going to hate you in the non-living?
Right.
Because they're a part of your DNA, so you can't get away from them.
Yeah.
You have those that were in the family that were good, bad, and indifferent. And even those that were quote unquote bad or indifferent, they're dealing with their own
issues.
They're dealing with their own discipline.
Yeah.
They're disciplined within the ancestral realm, because now if they were a selfish person, now they have to serve. And they have to serve those until they clear up their slate. Okay, that's one. So when you reconnect with them, which you never reconnect because you're always connected, it's how you embrace that space of grandma, grandpa giving you that hug, you know, even when things are difficult. So your reset is sometimes, say for instance, if whatever day you choose, you could choose a Sunday or whatever, and you can make the meal that you know that grandma, grandpa, so on and so forth used to have, or a particular liquor that they used to drink. You can put that to the side, drink some with them, and just have memories about grandma or grandpa. Meditate on them, and they will come. And then when they do, they're there to give you information in those thoughts. But if you don't want to deal with the past to fix the present, to guide you in the future, then guess what? They still will come, and they'll come at you in a different way. You know, they won't be there to push you. They'll be there to stand in front of you and face you and make you face the thing that you've been running from.
Right. And that's the thing, you know, our ancestors, very, very much so, they're emotionally pure. Let's just say that, because they haven't got time for a lot of the crap that we keep saying. Yeah, but we can't. No, but you know, they're like, you're going to do X. And a lot of the times we don't always understand why we have to do those things. And also they can be pretty difficult as well, pretty difficult at what's being asked of us. So I guess, you know, yourself, how do you handle the difficult things, the difficult requests that are asked of you? How do you handle those?
So there's two different spaces I have to navigate in, but they kind of coincide. One, as the Ifa priest, is to help to mend the world through the wisdom of Orunmila, which is basically the coded messages of God in the form of Ifa divination, to give how human beings should better their human experience by engaging in their spiritual self-development. That's one. Two, as a Egungun priest, now I have to begin to call upon this person's family member, invoke them, bring them up in front of the person while they're in front of the shrine and be like, look, your grandmother's here now. You can speak. And I'm not talking about like a Ouija ceremony or sitting in the dark. No, we're sitting in front of what we call Opaiku, which is a Egungun shrine. And then we call them up by, you know, calling their name, specific Oriki of Egungun. And when we call them, then we embed the ancestor's name, and then they come. You know, 9 times out of 10, the joke that I have is that, yo, I got him on speed dial. Who you want me to call? You know, and I say that as a joke just to loosen up the, loosen up the tension. But then when they come, they're able to ask questions. And when they do, the ancestors speak. And then when it's time for them to go, then we send them on. So, you know, we feed them regular food. We feed them alcohol. Sometimes they want other family members to get engaged in doing the work, because sometimes we didn't treat them right in the living. So then they're going to choose somebody in the living of current to say, hey, you have to take up the helm. I know that for me, it can get sometimes a little overwhelming, because people start coming, lots of them. And sometimes in the dream state, or even in the physical, like I'll give you a good example. My father has passed away. My grandfather has passed away. My grandfather said, you are the leader of this family now. And I asked, why? Why me? He said, because this person can't do this. This person can't do that. Because I had brothers, and this person can't do that. So you have to be the one. And once that happened, then I became the leader of one side of my family. When my great grandmother died, my mother became the female aspect, and I became the male aspect, right? So what would happen is that my father sits right here, my grandfather sits right here, and like the cartoons, how one is always talking in my ear, one is, and it's just like, yo, man, can you stop with the jokes? Please stop with the jokes. And people will look at me and be like, why are you looking like that? And I'm like, because you don't understand the conversation that goes on. You know, sometimes they'll come to you in dream state. Sometimes they'll come to you late at night. But then when they come any other time,
it's kind of crazy.
It's a beautiful it's a beautiful conversation. So to be able to handle that, you know, one thing that I'll say is that once I became an Egungun priest, a lot of people started dying. And the pain of death is something that the Egungun priest also has to manage. So it's not like you're being insensitive to the dead. Actually, you're being more sensitive. You're being more driven to know how to work with, you know? And as that happens, you become more spiritually aware of the presence and how to manage them, because one of the jobs of the Egungun priest is not only to don the masquerade, which is another conversation, but to also deal with the burial rites of families.
Interesting. This is like blowing my mind, because this is the thing about African traditions. They can be similar, but they are so intricately different. And there are so many aspects to every layer of it. It's just like, this is mind-blowing. But it's mind-blowing because of the ingenuity, of African ingenuity, that we created these systems, and they have sustained us.
It's engineering. It's engineering that ties us from the best way I could describe it is that, and I say this all the time, what's inside is outside, and what's outside is inside. What's above is below, and what's below is above, okay? So, and then everything else on the angle.
Right.
But because we are dealing with the microcosm and macrocosm of life, we are also dealing with that microcosm and macrocosm of the universe as it relates to our earthly experience. And inside of that is the spiritual experience that happens from earth back to heaven. So there's constant communication, constant revisiting and returning and going and coming that happens in between that experience.
Wow.
So it's engineering, it's ingenuity. And Africans have always had this technology.
And that's, you know, I love that phrase. It's something a former guest, Siete Sordaji's used, and I've picked it up and I love it. African technologies, ancestral technologies, which is, you know, all the things that we're doing, such as ancestral reverence, you know, some of the rituals that we do, spiritual hygiene, all of these things are technologies that, you know, we're not, when we use that language, then it's like we're giving it status. And I think it is really important for us to use the right types of language when we talk about traditional practices, because what we can see is that it is becoming quite popular now, right? And when things become popular, sometimes meaning gets lost, because the dollar is driving why this is being presented to you the way it is. And so it's really important that these conversations happen. It's really important that we are protecting this amazing ancestral technology, but also that we are allowing people to access it, but access it in the right way, because there are right ways to do this and there are wrong ways to do this, you know? So I guess for you, how do you feel about the kind of progression of African spirituality now? Like it's kind of everywhere, but it's not. And then it's like, so how do you feel? Because as you said, from the 80s, you've been pulling little bits of, like, you know, African inspired or African, you know, processes into your life, into your family life. What do you feel about how it is now, kind of thing?
So we always talk about praying for healing of the nation, praying for healing of our communities, praying for healing on many levels for human beings. Well, the solution has been there, but we didn't know how to connect with it, because they're always trying to keep Africa and the diaspora separate. Well, you know, if we look at the periods of time from the 60s, maybe even a little bit previous to that, but the 60s of the movement of coming of these different cultures, you know, you got Akan coming, you got Ifa coming, you know, you got Santeria coming, you got, you know, all these different blendings of cultures, because you have members of these communities coming into America at the time, and academics or academicians and musicians traveling to these places and bringing these pieces back. So we've always asked for a solution to our problem. Well, the solution is here. And those children who have been, as they say, sleeping, now they woke. And they're waking up to that technology that will allow for them to fix their lives. So yes, it's popular, and I am totally happy that we are beginning to wake up. It's not a 23andMe thing. It's not a, you know, Ancestry.com thing. That's good. But then at the same time, the things that are inside of us are waking up. So, you know, COVID was a good period because it sat you down to focus on who you are as an individual. Okay. And really focus on things. But as things began to open up, and as we are waking up to this culture, yes, you are starting to see more young members from the street, young men, young women seeking power, because they see that there's power inside of these cultures. But the one thing that they say about power is that, you know, power can corrupt. Absolutely. And absolute power can corrupt. Absolutely. So when you have this as a part of your spiritual package, it makes you have to have the discipline to be able to maintain your development within it, because, you know, sometimes people's egos will get even more bigger than what they are once they start becoming priests, and they don't realize that the path to priesthood and even becoming a priest actually takes your path from being out here and makes it real narrow. So the things that you thought you used to be able to do, no, as you are helping human beings develop, you have to be spiritually disciplined. You have to have spiritual discipline just like anyone else. So, you know, some people that have been coming from the Muslim or Christian or any other community that have always relied on, and please don't take this as anything bad, but I do have to say this, they've taken it as being able to have a person as a scapegoat to say, okay, I can put my sins on you and I can be forgiven in the morning, but I can go to this club and shake tail, you know? Well, here's the reality. If you pull back those layers, and even those religions, even Muhammad or even Jesus, or however you want to classify that particular leader of that religion, it was always, it was always about spiritual development through self-mastery. That's what Christ is. That's what, you know, true Mohammedism, true Islam is. But people don't want to do that.
Hard.
They want the look, they want the feel, but they don't want the discipline.
And that's the thing which I really love about African spirituality, that it is pure discipline. From the rituals, from all the ingredients of the rituals that you need to put together. Like, this is no easy thing. This is a lifestyle. This is something you have to commit to.
It's not easy.
No, it's not.
It's not easy. You know, most people will actually run from being responsible for their own spiritual development. You know, they are always looking outside of themselves for the answer, when in actuality, the answer is inside. And then when you realize that, like I said, inside is outside and outside is inside, yes, when you begin to practice and develop a relationship with your Orisha, which is outside of you, you can see the physical form of it. When we hear the stories of Oshun being a river, which is a physical river in Oshobo, when you see Oya as, you know, the storm or the tempest, and you see the lightning and you equate it to Sango, but when you start looking at their Oriki as individuals that were actually living, or deities that actually lived on the earth for a period of time, we begin to see that those same qualities are also inside of us, and those qualities are what we are being able to access to fix ourselves. So then when we look outside of ourselves and we see what existence is and what existence created as a human being, we are existence. And everything that happens around us is what existence created. So what we create in our world, you know, basically will tell us that either things have been going very, very, very good, or very, very, I don't want to say bad, but they've just taken a different path. And sometimes we have to bring the path back to the one. I get you. And, you know, like James Brown said, we got to get on the one.
Not the two.
So as we, on the one. So as we put those things together, we begin to see that if we can fix our inside world, our outside world would become mended. So, you know, yes, there is a magical experience inside of, you know, these traditions. There's a very, what's the word I want to say? It's like, it's a very magical world. It very much so is. The only thing is that as we connect to that experience, we can't be afraid of what we are. We are spirits inside of a human form that is living not only a human, but also a spiritual experience. And that is the power that God gave us to be able to live. Our ancestors gave us the chance to be here, so then that way we can continue on what our legacy is through each of our mother, father, so on and so forth. So, you know, it's a very, very interesting experience to live, but sometimes because, you know, we're fearful of spirits, we've always been taught that, you know, the spirits, you know, you don't want to wake up the wrong spirits. That is true.
It's true. But they
but
wake
at the
anyway,
same time,
and they've always been around. Like, they're not going anywhere.
Spirits, most of those spirits that we come in contact with are either our ancestors, they are what we call our Egbe Orun, which are our comrades in heaven, or they are our Orisha, our Ori, which is our divine head, and which causes for us to, you know, see that there are malevolent forces in this world as well. That's what people are scared of, is the malevolent forces.
And but you see, so this brings me on to this whole thing about spiritual hygiene, right? And why it's so important, because there are processes, protocols, and rituals we can do to protect ourselves from malevolent forces. You know what I mean? And I think spiritual hygiene sometimes is the missing kind of component in this discussion of, ooh, the spooky spirits. Yes, there's ways to protect you against spooky spirits. You know what I mean? And I think that if we, just like we wear shoes so our feet don't get you know, scuffed when we go outside on the pavement or dirty, like everything has a way to protect itself. So I think if people are far more kind of objective about the spiritual world, instead of just thinking about the fear that they've been taught about things like this, that they can actually embrace a lot more than just the kind of like, well, you know, I think this is going to happen and blah, 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 this, that, the other. Because 9 times out of 10, it could have already been happening to you. You know, and maybe connecting with your ancestors is going to guide you to a place where you're going to be able to manage these situations with triumph, or even at least just manage them a lot better. You know what I mean? And so I think it's something that we need to really focus on, which is spiritual hygiene and keeping our spirits clean. And I mean, what does spiritual hygiene mean to you? And what would be a few things, if you can, recommend to people to kind of keep doing for themselves, to keep themselves spiritually clean?
So the, you know, IG, you know, is not always the best platform for
definitely not
some aspects of conversation and drags. So I think
we save that for another day.
I don't want to get away from your question.
Yeah.
You know, IG is dragging.
Yeah, I get you.
But what I do want to say is that one has ancestors. No matter what corner of the earth you live on. You can go inside the Chinese restaurant. You can go inside the Japanese restaurant. You can go to the Indian restaurant, and each of these places have shrines.
They do, right?
Because,
as you step in.
You know, ancestors are very important.
I can hear you. Well, I can still hear you.
I'm on because like I said, IG is doing something that, you know, slowing us down.
Yeah.
So when you have these cultures that rely heavily on one's ancestors, you know, they too always look back at the legacy that ancestor has created, and they see it and deem it very important for their children and their children's children to remember what is the role inside of society. So then that way, when they are living in the world, they know that they cannot do things that are unbecoming of one's generation.
Right.
And as they begin to live their life, they will find that life becomes more difficult when you move away from your ancestral path or your ancestral ways. This is the reason why the ancestors will come from time to time to remind you of these things that you must always adhere to. Now of, you know, how one will be able to maintain a connection with one's ancestors is that the first thing I always tell people is that you should always remember by starting with your parent, going to your grandparent, and asking questions about who your family is. What did they used to do? Where are they from? You know? So when you are able to do these things, you will find that you begin to pull back layers. It's like the layers of an onion, or even like a spiral, like the snail shell. And you begin to go back into those areas where you find out stories about your past. And those past stories of ancestors before can also explain the position that you are supposed to live within. If you are a leader and you were meant to be born a leader, you will be that. If you are not meant to be that, then there's something there that's meant to come here to accomplish, and they will support you in that. But the first thing that you have to do is you have to begin to know your family elements, so then that way it will help to send you in the right path. In Ifa and Egungun, we have masquerade that we can use as a physical representation of the ancestor returning annually. And when we use the masquerade annually, it will come and it will be the physical presence. So we have drumming, we have dancing, we have food, and then when the ancestor returns, we'll see through the dancing that they will mimic movements of a previous ancestor. Then we'll be like, I know that's my father used to walk like that. Okay. Or my grandmother used to make these gestures. So when those things would happen, we would end up saying, hey, we know that the ancestor returned and the ancestor is happy, and the ancestor comes and prays for us. And then when it's time for the masquerade to go, we continue to celebrate them. So there are basic, and then there are ways that are more, based in, actual ritual work and things like that. But everyone has an ancestor, and everyone can, do something to reach with them.
I love that. And it's, I'm often thinking about, legacy and purpose, and, a lot of people have questions around that. What is my legacy? What is my purpose? And I think a really good starting point, as you said, is family. Like finding out the roles of past loved ones or people who are even present, finding out, what your family is known for. And sometimes families aren't known for stuff, but there's people that are from farming families. There's people who were great musicians in their families, and they have so many different kind of talents, and it's really important because it informs not only who you are, but also your future as well. And so we're starting with the family. I mean, what would you suggest for people who maybe don't have family units where they feel they could do that, like get that information from? What would you suggest to people trying to kind of connect to ancestral traditions like that?
Okay, my first suggestion, I know IG went through its little stutter like it does. So hopefully the message that I was putting forward was able to come through. The first thing that I say is that we all have a family member that we're most comfortable with, whether it be an aunt, an uncle, a mother, a father. Where things can become a little difficult is, say, for instance, in the case of adoption. There's always a record of the birth parent. There's always a record of that person who put you up for adoption. And as difficult as it may feel or seem, that is where you can also start. And you have to be willing enough to face this, again, generational trauma, because it's a trauma to feel like you've been, left alone, you've been abandoned. Well, you start there. And from that point, there are records of that person's parents. There is maybe a marital record in the county if you know where they gave birth to you. There's hospital record. So then you can start there. And then you'll start watching the dominoes start falling. Okay? That's one. If you, like I said, if you have a favorite family member, ask them questions. Good, bad, or indifferent questions, because, again, we do have traumas in our family, such as, being a child of a multiple family, meaning that father was, had multiple children, here, there, and everywhere, or, outside of the relationship. Mom might have had multiple children, with different men. So there's a lot of different ways that you can, approach that. And when you speak to them, ask them hard questions. One thing that we don't want to always face is that, let's just use the case of, family molestation, where, we don't want to ask questions because shame that has happened inside of a family causes for people to be closed off, and they don't want to talk about, or they're in denial about, say, maybe uncle or grandpa or so on and so forth. And you might run into a blockage of trying to get that information from somebody because of a scenario like that. But I guarantee you, if you begin to ask the questions of, who was my great aunt, and the great aunt has a birth certificate, and it's going to give you the answer to, who their children are, and you'll watch the bubble begin to start expanding, and that's something that is simple, but you gotta want to do it. If you don't want to do it, then you're not going to want to know. And if you don't want to know, then, what can I tell you? How can I always say, how can I help you then? The journey, but the reality is that, within my family, we did some very serious work. And, on one end, it was revealed to me through that where our family stemmed from, based off of that particular masquerade, which talked about where our ancestors were from. Then we did the actual Ancestry.com journey and traveling of information. And we went all the way back pretty far on one side, on my father's side, but on my mother's side, there's only a specific period where you begin to see our lineage pop up, no matter if it's through the last name of that particular plantation, or even the manifest. And, when I look back and I started putting the pieces together between both of those messages, we realized that our family, there's only a particular period in time when people came from this particular region, from Nigeria to the Caribbean to the States. And as you began to see that, there's no way they could have came previous to that time, because there was no trading, or no kidnapping from that region yet. But we were able to, find that information, on both sides. Remember, having one foot in and one foot out is not always. I always have this conversation, where, say for instance, the Nigerian will always ask me, how are you, Omo Yoruba? I'll be like, because me as a person, how can you tell me where I'm from when you are still dealing with the stories of our kidnapping?
Basically.
How can you tell me I'm not from this region when all of our tradition is spread across all of these regions? So parts of information that I have been studying recently is that in Brazil, in Trinidad, St. Lucia, Grenada, and even Cuba, were a specific Yoruba people, which were Ijesa. And if you look at where they left from, they either left from one of two places. They left from Lagos or they left from Badagry, because those were where the markets were. And they had to come from the interior to bring them from that area. Okay. Well, the same thing happens for Ghana. The same thing happens, but where it gets complicated is when you get to the diaspora and you start having where part of that family grouping that was used up, say in their first stop, which was Trinidad. Then they got removed from that plantation and then they got sent to Grenada or or Suriname or Guyana. And then they got transferred from there to the States, depending on who was doing the shopping in those markets. So this is the work that, as we are all interconnected from that experience, we cannot forget that our experience is not only that is tied to the African slave Holocaust, but it's also tied to the Holocaust of the Native American, of the Creek, the Seminole, the Cherokee, the Apache, all of the African nations that embraced those of the Native American nations. And because we are tied together, you know, these are the things where we can't just say that we're just one solely.
No.
We are a mixture of both of those groups. And as we begin to find them out, it is better for us to begin to embrace our ancestral lineages through both of those cultures, because we are a mixture of both.
I love that. I love that. You know, I think love is the wrong word. I think, you know, this European interruption, which has happened to Africans, which is why me and you are speaking English right now, you know, which is why we are reconnecting with ourselves in this way, it's brought so much trauma, but there's some beauty in how we as a people have dealt with it, the resilience, you know what I mean, our innovation, our sheer will to just keep going. You know, the pain of enduring what we have is very real. And this is the trauma we do have to deal with and manage and break, and also just sort of like transmute it into something else. And this is where I find African spirituality one of the best vehicles to do so. The transmutation of the oppression, of the brainwashing, of all of that stuff can happen within this space that is totally ours and ours only. It has not been interrupted. It has been protected. It is still as pure as it was 200 centuries ago, you know? And the thing is that it's really important, though, that I feel we come from a place of transmutation with all the traumas and even our own selves, right? So it's about a reimagining rather than I want to refresh who I am. Well, let's reimagine ourselves without the white gaze, without white supremacy, without Christianity and Muslim, all these Abrahamic religions. Who would we be if that was the case? And I feel the answers lie in our spirituality, the spirituality and our African and ancestral technologies. So I guess for you, how would you describe what African spirituality has brought to your life?
It has brought a certain level of focus. And that focus is how in tune I am with the nature inside of myself and the nature outside of myself. And how my world is a product of what I create. You know, what I create outside of myself also comes from the thoughts and the discipline that I have in order for my world to be peaceful. As they say, be the change you want to be in the world, that you want to see in the world. And you have to be that. The other aspect is the spirituality that comes from that. Being able to look at my spiritual nature outside of myself as well as inside of myself, and how that also helps to mend, you know, the broken lives around me by living this deep-seated wisdom that's embedded in Ifa, that's embedded in the power of our ancestors. You know, one thing that I didn't get to share, you know, was that, you know, in going to your question of how did I get here? Well, 2009, I went to go and become initiated to Egungun, and my son was with me, and I went with another young lady who was also going to make Ifa, and that lady's no longer here. You know, we didn't know that, well, I didn't know that she was battling with a very bad stage of cancer. Well, anyways, we get there, we go through initiation, and we were there for Aduni Olorisha, otherwise known as Susan Wenger. You know, very, very important lady in Oshogo. Austrian lady who was the wife of Olivier. Well, we were at her funeral and everything was all good. And they tell you don't drink water while you're there. Don't drink the water out of like a bag or anything like that. And, mosquitoes, you get malaria, it's rampant, blah, blah, blah. Well, I went through my initiation. It was beautiful. My masquerade, everything was beautiful, colorful. And then about 9 days after I got back, I found myself becoming very, very sick. I had 2 strands of malaria to the point where the hospital that I was in, they used me as a case.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, you paused a bit. Let's hopefully, come on, Instagram, do your job. Come on, we need this information. Hopefully it'll just sort itself out. Let's give it a couple of seconds. Come on, Instagram. Instagram, I'm sending you powerful vibes to sort your shit out. Oh, he's gone. Okay, don't worry. We're going to get him back. I just love listening to Orsa. He's been incredibly informative and helpful to my journey. And as you can see, he's a fountain of knowledge. And I just love, like, he's so deep with it. And it's the deepness of his faith is very reflective of himself, and it's very second nature. It's not a performance. It's it's just so good, and I love being around him and his partner. So I'm so happy that also was here, but let's hope he will join back in. I think it's just probably an internet and Instagram problem, but us, we always sort it out, and he should be joining back in a second. Come on, we're waiting for you. Yay.
It's all right.
Yeah. It's crazy. I know. I'm like,
we kind of dropped out there for a second.
Yeah, I was kind of like doing my whole spell work. I was like, come on, bring him back. But yeah, you were saying you felt sick and you had 2 strands of malaria, and then you became a case study.
This is IG for you.
Yeah, I know.
This is IG.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah. I don't know where I left off at is that, I had gotten very, very sick in Nigeria. Very sick. Came back with malaria. My doctor said I'm a walking miracle. I was in a coma for like 7 days.
Damn.
Out of roughly about 8 to, can't remember exactly how many days, but I was in ICU for quite some time, basically dead man walking. And, after I came out of that situation, I realized that we can't take life for granted. And if something like a mosquito can take me off this planet that easily, just imagine, what other people can do if they, are doing things to try to, take your life off this planet. So please be mindful about what you say and what you think about people, because you don't know how much power that you have out of what you say and out of what you think about people. So as I came back, the voices that I used to hear when I was small and, have these, thoughts and processes I never had an answer to, and how I knew the answer to this question or that question, it started to become clear to me that, in coming out of that coma, there was one thing that I do remember out of a whole plan. And one of those things was that imagine being in a room with all of your ancestors and they're sitting there and they're having a party and everybody's sitting down drinking, having a good time, and you walk in the room and the room stops and everybody looks at you as like, excuse me, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here right now.
They're like,
and they're saying, you know what? It's time for you, get out of here.
Yeah.
When it's time, we'll call
but
you.
not now.
But until then, if you need to call us, here's my card. Here's how you call us. So that's kind of, what happens, once you feel that pain of death, because everybody is scared of dying. But dying is also a part of your spiritual development. It's just that you shed the physical body and now you take on a different role in the form of the the actual spirit that you are.
Right.
So there are a lot of different aspects depending on what culture that this knowledge is being explained in.
Right.
But the tenets are roughly the same. So it's not any different than, you know, what happens in Chinese culture, Japanese culture, Aboriginal culture, Native American culture, as it relates to our connection to ancestors.
Some
people are chosen for it.
Right. And this is, it's funny, isn't it? You went through something like a initiation and then nearly a death. You know, it's funny how it's kind of like, it is a bit of a rebirth, wasn't it? It was like
Yes.
a rebirth, and maybe that was part of the initiation. You know what I mean? In spiritual terms.
Oh yeah, definitely. One of the things that, you know, inside of Ifa, they have a term called ikuparo. Ikuparo is, you know, iku is death. Paro is to have a rebirth, or like a spiritual rebirth.
Right.
So, you know, even though it talks about death, there may be parts of you that have to die.
Right.
In order for you to live.
Right. Ooh, say
exactly.
That.
So,
yes.
so there are things that you've developed over time. Bad character, bad thoughts, bad actions. You know, and those parts of you have to die in order for you to be able to really become whole again. Yeah. One of the things, and this is going to be most interesting. So the masquerade is made of cloth, right? And there are multiple layers of this cloth. And there is no part of the physical aspect of an individual or even a spirit that you can see outside. I mean, you can't see the hands, you can't see the feet, you can't see the face, but there's just cloth. And the cloth of the multiple layers of generations, right? Because each year you add something new. But each cloth, each cloth represents something that holds your spiritual fabric, your spiritual self intact.
Wow.
Well, over time, you know, you've had things in your life that have snagged your cloth, that have pulled the thread, and there are areas where there's holes. So there might be like your spiritual essence is having a hemorrhage, or having a leaking out, or an exposure to the outside elements, the malevolent forces. So you have to go in and mend those holes in order for that essence of yourself not to leak out, right? So what happens is the hard work to do is to go back into those deep-seated places that have created your trauma, face them, sew them up, mend them, and keep your spiritual fabric intact. So then that way the malevolent forces don't eat on the wounds of your spiritual self. Okay? So, you know, that's just an example. Even in the Toltec, in more Mexican cultures, they talk about, you know, being at a space of dealing with spiritual transformation, which means that you have to go inside. They actually put you in a box, and they leave you in that box until you really face that thing that you have been dealing with. Okay? In our society, they call it solitary confinement. They put you inside of a prison cell, and they force you to look at those things, those
think about yourself,
quote unquote ghosts that chase you around. You know, and even your ancestors are there to tell you, what are you doing? Stop acting like this. Get your life back on track. So, you know, the cloth are many multiple layers. And you said something earlier about for 200 centuries we've been intact. We've been intact. So look at where we are now. Our colorful cloths, our colorful nature, our colorful cultures are shining through to the point where everybody wants to be emulating that.
So you know what? I'm gonna have to get you back because we've got like 10 seconds left. So where can people find you, Osar? Where can people find you? Where? Quick, 8.
All social media handles at DJ Asar. That's DJ AUSAR.
We're gonna go, but I love you and thank you.